All right.
So, good evening for everyone. Thank you very much for watching us today. And we would like to welcome our friend Murillo that is going to talk about reincarnation tonight. And we um, advise, we're going to put the link for the prayers, the the book of prayers, and we advise after the meeting if you would like to have the virtual pass. Uh, so we're gonna do the our prayer now, and Murilo today is gonna talk about thoughts on reincarnation, and we really we are sure that we're gonna learn a lot about that. Um, Murilo, you would like to make the prayer? Or,
Yes, I can do it.
yeah? Okay, thank you.
Dear Father and Master Jesus, thank you for the opportunity to be united in your name, in the cause of love that governs the universe, that governs all living beings. The love so big, so grand that we cannot even fathom how far it reaches the universe, which is infinite. And we hope and we pray and we ask for the blessings to all of those here present, both incarnate and discarnate, that we learn something today, something that challenges our views, something that reinforces our views, something new, something that we feel compelled to share with our family, friends, those around us. And together we continue in this evolution of ourselves and our planet. Bless all of us here present in flesh and spirit, and we ask permission to begin tonight's studies. And so be it.
So, Murilo, it's
Thank you.
with you.
Hi, Grace. Good evening, too. Thank you for joining us. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Murilo, and I will, as Aline said, I thought for today I would bring some thoughts on reincarnation, and that's how I chose to title today's meeting because I really want to begin by saying that these are my thoughts, my reflections on reincarnation. Yes, they are based on the teachings of Spiritism, of things that I have been learning since I joined Spiritism, but in the end, they are my thoughts and how I make sense of such a large topic like reincarnation. And some of these thoughts are more fully formed than others. And with that, I may say things that are not quite right, can be completely wrong. Some of or things that you might see it in a different way, and that is of course absolutely okay. And that is why we have our discussion at the end of our talks, or even through the talks. So it's a small group today. So if any of you have anything um, to share right away, we're more than happy to do that and really make it as informal as possible. Um, and I'll be the first to say as well that these thoughts may also seem scattered and kind of all over the place. So I hope I won't lose you. Really did this kind of like just jotting everything down and rearranging things, and they might still come out a little scattered. So here are some of my thoughts on reincarnation. So even before I joined Spiritism, I already thought that reincarnation made sense to me. Like I had no questions. To me, reincarnation just made sense. And it was even like I had more faith in reincarnation than like in God or in Jesus, which even to this day, sometimes I like it's the one thing that I know is true. Like I know it really deep in my soul. And there are other things about religion, about spirituality that I am not as certain about as I am of reincarnation. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. And and when I kind of think a little bit deeper about why it makes so much sense to me, the one thing that I come to is we just can't do it all in one life. That to me doesn't make sense. How I am supposed to reach perfection, which is our destiny, but in this one lifetime and in this planet, which we know what is going on earth, what's been going on, it's just it doesn't make sense to me. And also, and it's, again, it's not because I am lazy and I want to put that off, putting things off that I can do today. And there are parts of sometimes of that thought that can be about that. But again, when our destination is perfection, can we really achieve that in one lifetime? So that's kind of like a big question that always sits with me. And I think reincarnation, um, um, you know, lends a little bit of explanation to that. Also, kind of going along with, moving forward with my thoughts, reincarnation is not usually what we have seen in most popular movies. So it's not coming back as a cute dog or cat or even a plant. I think I've seen sometimes like things that are like in a plant out there. So and I loved the movie So from Pixar and Disney, which is just out now. But I am the first person to say that what they were talking about in there, at a closer look, it is not reincarnation. Something else, and it's a valid thing, but it's really not reincarnation how we spiritists think of reincarnation. Also, I've seen some popular movies treat reincarnation like, we die today and tomorrow we reincarnate, right, in that cute dog or that cute plant or whatever. But it's also not quite like that, and I'm gonna say a little bit more about this in a little bit. I also don't think that reincarnation, I also think that reincarnation is not karma. So, the law of action and reaction, right? So I think the law of action and reaction is utilized in the reincarnation process, but they're not the same thing. Okay, what do I mean by law of action and reaction? So when I first began learning about reincarnation, I thought, from my understanding back then, and this was like 20 years ago, excuse me, that it worked a little bit more like, the eye for an eye law, right? Or retaliation. So, in other words, if I did X, X will be done unto me in the next life. So, in a very basic, and that's the thing, it's a very simplistic way. I think it really tries to boil down reincarnation to that. So, if I do X, I will get X in the next life. So if I am rich and I'm greedy, maybe with my money in this life, in my next life, I will be poor. Or if I physically hurt someone in the next life, maybe I will be physically hurt too. And we can, think of many, many other examples of that equation. So if you do X, X will be done unto you. And so, and along with that, I also have seen a lot of folks that believe in reincarnation, and most folks that I know are spiritists. So in my experience, I've seen a lot of spiritists trying to guess what people or people's words, right? So like, oh, you were born here or you were born there, in your previous life, or you were, a doctor or a nurse. Like, there's all these kind of guesswork, right? One that comes to mind that I have heard many times that has to do with the people in this country, in the U.S., is that I've actually heard that some people think that people of the Roman Empire are now mostly reincarnated in the United States, and I have seen the rationale because of the monuments in Washington D.C. As proof of that, those pillars and columns, and like even the government, right? Like some of that, and that can probably be said a lot to the Western society. So I've heard of that. So again, that kind of guesswork. And then something that I've even have witnessed and also have heard about is these kind of simplistic view of reincarnation, again, of you do X, X will be done unto you, used in fraternal assistance, using these really simplistic explanations to people suffering. So if you do, so like, oh, you are suffering because of this. Oh, maybe that's because you were, you did this to someone else in the past and all that. And I just don't think that's the place and time for us to analyze anyone when they're suffering or seeking assistance, right? And that's probably a topic, that can be a topic for a talk in itself about, about not how not to do fraternal assistance. So again, trying to stay away from the simplistic views of reincarnation, of, that's the law of action and reaction. So the more I read, the more I analyzed, the more I talked to people, in our meetings, in our studies, this simplistic view of reincarnation, that you do X and you get X in next life, just doesn't sit well with me. And I know that it has to be more nuanced and more subtle than that. And of course, more complex too. So, and I'll put a pin on that, and I'll come back to this thought towards the end, just kind of bring everything together. But the next thought that I also had about reincarnation is that when I was learning about reincarnation, it explained so much about the human condition. What do I mean by this? I think reincarnation explains the diversity of the human condition. It offers a possible solution to these stark differences that exist between us, right? So when we catch ourselves thinking about, why is it that I have all this in my life and other people don't have much, or why parts of the world are in this state versus that state, right? So reincarnation explained this because our starting point is not here on this life. The starting point truly is that moment when we are created by God. And that in itself also can be a talk. But if we think about, again, that basic principle that we know, that we were all created equal, but knowing that that moment of creation is not when we incarnated here on this planet. I mean, we're talking really, really all the way back there, right? So at that point, reincarnations, so the multiple reincarnations that we have, hundreds, thousands, maybe even millions of reincarnation, that's what gives us the many experiences that we have. It informs our personality, right? So again, the way Murillo is here right now, it has a cause, it has a beginning in, many, many lives before. Our likes and dislikes, our aptitudes, so our talents, right? And in many ways, it really explains the geniuses and the prodigies. So, there are many, many documented cases of children, right, that just walk up to a violin, pick it up, and they can play like it's, they are the most talented person, or the piano, or people that have really, really easy, are really easy with language. So all these things are explained by reincarnation, and also the cause of our pain and suffering, and really the cause of everything. Because what the spirits what the spirits tells us in many, many works in the spiritist doctrine is that if we don't find a cause for X in this life, it is very much tied to a previous one, right? So again, if we cannot explain why and using a positive example, if we cannot explain how does this child walk up to, again, to a piano and just start playing Beethoven or another classical piece or something that's very complex, like, they weren't introduced to music, they weren't into, what is the explanation there? And I think, science offers, the current science offers one explanation, but I think reincarnation needs to be part of that conversation. And there are many, I think, studies now, and I've, that are looking at that as a possible theory, right? Because it is really a hypothesis at this point. But going back to pain and suffering, right? We know that if there isn't a cause in this life, it is tied to a previous one. So again, with disease or situations that happen in our lives that just don't make sense right now, right? How can someone develop again lung cancer when they never smoked a day in this life? Could it be from a previous life? So how does the spirit brings all that information within itself? So and I'll be the first to say that this process is very complicated, and I myself don't understand all the nuances of it. But from what I have studied so far, what I do know is that again we have the spirit, we have our body, and in between we have the perispirit. And this perispirit, which is not as ethereal as the soul, as the spirit, but not as rough and materialistic as the body, is the medium, if you will, to bring those two together. So, because again, our spirits need an envelope to be around it, and that is where all these impressions, all these experiences are recorded. So when we as spirits have all this experience, it gets recorded in the perispirit, and when we are born or reincarnate, these lives before, lives that will come, the perispirit then impresses upon the body all of our information. It's almost like a DNA, right, of our lives that brings into this perispirit. So it is that makeup that makes all of us, and that is for the again things that manifest physically in our bodies. Again, there are tons of other videos and literature on this. I wish I could go a lot more in detail. I don't have the knowledge to do that, but I do know that it is in the perispirit that all that information is held. So it might be just another topic for us to continue to talk about. Now, one of my biggest points, I think, one of my biggest thoughts on reincarnation is that it is tied to progress. So there's this constant learning and unlearning and relearning that we do to reach perfection. So that to me makes sense, right? I love the analogy that we always use, or that many spiritists use, that reincarnating is like going to school, right? Think of it as the different grades that you have to master, right? So when you are done with first grade, you go to second grade. Excuse me, when you are done with second grade, you go on to third grade, so on and so forth. So it's like that. It's probably one of the most simple and yet really powerful analogies that we have to this idea of progress, of learning, this constant learning that we have to do to reach perfection. Because in nature, nothing is overnight. Nothing happens overnight. Nothing is rushed. Nothing, there are not these jumps, right? So again, using another analogy here, when we go from day to night or night to day, it always amazes me when there's that moment when you just know that, like, oh, it's now day, or oh, it's now night, right? But it's so subtle. And it's not when the sun sets. We know that, like, we can see the sun you know setting in the horizon, or then also rising in the horizon, and we know it's not quite that, but there's something else, and it's in that something else, I feel, where like the learning takes place, and there's that dissonance, and then you're like, oh, now I know not to do X, Y, and Z. And I think reincarnation, when it's tied to progress, which is a law of the universe, it's one of the immutable laws of the universe. Progress is, excuse me, let me get a sip of water here real quick. Excuse me. That, I think it is so tied to that. And that is through reincarnation that we come to not only Earth, because again, we have to remind ourselves that Earth is not the only planet in the universe. And that would not be a just God to just have one planet in the whole universe where everybody is, right? All the creation is, but it's really thinking about all of these planets that populate the universe. So so reincarnation, because it is that process, also takes planning. And I have read in many books, and I think the books of the series of André Luiz, which are psychographed by Chico Xavier, they do a really good job of showing that the reincarnation process, and showing that planning, that it takes planning, that we have a plan when we arrive here, and that plan is etched in our consciousness, and it is through knowing ourselves that we will know and be certain of what that plan is. And that's why it's so important, that old saying that know thyself. And that's when you know yourself, you know what you're supposed to be doing, you know what you're supposed to be following, right? And having said all that, reincarnation also is freedom. We keep our free will. We have this plan, but we probably have deviated from our plan many times. The same way that we make end of the year resolutions every year, right? When December 31st comes around and we're ready to make those resolutions, we say, starting tomorrow, I will do X, or I will stop doing X. And how many times do we really stop doing that? Or how many times do we really, learn something new? It's not there. But again, it's having that freedom to have the free will and to do what our free will is, or allows us to do. Because in the end, I really think that reincarnation is a second chance, a third chance, a hundredth chance. And I would like to say that no spirit is left behind when it comes to our happiness. We might be stuck in a place for a long time. We might be stuck in a state of grief, in a state of denial, in a state of downright disobedience and throwing tantrums. Um, but progress doesn't stop for anyone. And that's why when we say that, when planets also progress, those that are not able to move forward with the planet are also taken to other planets where their contributions will make an impact to that planet's progress at the same time that it's making contributions to that individual's progress, right? So it is all tied in such perfect harmony, in such perfect balance, that if you really stop to think about, you will go crazy, because there's no way around that. You will go crazy. But at the same time, having the faith that everything is so well balanced, that everything is where it's supposed to be, gives us hope and gives us solace and gives us the motivation that we need to keep moving forward. And that's where I kind of wanted to link to that, to that first point, when I said that, that simplistic view of reincarnation just doesn't cut it for me anymore, that if I do X, I will get X. Because it serves a bigger purpose, that God uses of our need to progress, and of our of working on our inner transformation, to also work on the inner transformation of a people or a planet, right, or of a humanity. So while I'm still doing my own inner transformation, that is used to also make a change to the humanity. And that is why every single one of us matters in this universe. That is why like no spirit will be left behind when it comes down to our happiness, to our perfection. And we, again, we might be stuck in many times in these states of denial, of grief, of disobedience. But one day the penny drops. One day the hood is lifted from our views, and we'll be able to see it again. So we cannot lose hope. We cannot lose hope on ourselves, on our loved ones, on our enemies, because again, in the end, we're all creations of God, and we're all destined for perfection. But it is also about taking these small steps, because like I said, change doesn't happen overnight. So it kind of goes all the way back to say, well, that's why we cannot possibly reincarnate the next day after our passing. Like that just doesn't make sense, right? When we know some of these things, I can't just reincarnate like that. Now, and again, I haven't done a lot of study on this, but I have read some thoughts on like the reincarnation of animals, for example, that those are are more rapid than like us, as as individual spirits who have our individuality and our intelligence a little bit more developed than our animal in the animal kingdom. So I have heard, and maybe some of you in the room can then talk about that later, but with, again, just animals, dogs, cats, like that's more of a, the spirit, the essence that leaves that being, goes into another one, or is reincarnated in another one, like, kind of faster. I don't know how fast, but it's not as doesn't take as much time as we do, because again, not only we have to make that planning, and again, that's, some of us have the ability to make that planning, not everybody does. That's also a different thought there. But also, we're told that, believe it or not, there is a line to reincarnate in this planet. So reincarnation is seen as that really, really important opportunity, because in the end, we have to go through the experience of the body, of the flesh, to be able to ascend above the body, above the physical things. So that is why it's also important for us to have this experience. But in the end, I want to say that reincarnation is a mechanism of love. So when I first hear of crimes, or people hurting each other, especially even the more heinous, when someone loses their life as a result of crimes of passion, or just crime in general, my first thought is how these spirits are now linked by something that's so cruel and so dark. But thanks to the loving nature of our Father and this blessing of reincarnation, they now get a second chance to come back and to work on their amends. So it really, really goes against a lot of other religions when they say, well, you do this and now you are, you know condemned eternally to hell or heaven, or right, all these things. And that just doesn't exist in spiritism, and in the faith of reincarnation. It is, to me, the most the ultimate proof of love, that reincarnation exists, because imagine the impact that those spirits will have on each other, coming back together and be given the second, the third, the 100th chance to work on their relationship, on working on their amends. And really, if we really search deep within ourselves, we know that we are probably those people that have committed heinous crimes against one another, and they are now coming together and making amends. And again, it's not just those people, right? We're talking about ourselves. And that is why I think the reincarnation is a gift, to have this belief, this faith, that my loved ones, my enemies, will get a second chance on doing the right thing. It is a very powerful thing. And now I wanted to show a clip of a movie that I recently watched. That um, well, I'll show you the clip, and then I'll tell you what I was thinking about. But for that, I'm actually going to pause our video, because I don't want to put the clip of the clip on YouTube and have it taken down. So I'm going to pause our video. Okay. Pretty powerful, right? Like, to see, so kind of, so again, people didn't see this, but we just saw someone that was talking about his son that he lost to suicide, and how and how it's hard for him to, as a father, to keep carrying on, right? And knowing that, but he's honoring his son, by just living, right? By just living, saying that, and then what he says at the end of, we will, I'll get to see him again, and in the life, and then what he was meaning by the life that he lives. I think, well, both is the life, but also in this movie Nomadland, they're all like nomads. They move around. They don't stay at one place. And and that gentleman, he found a purpose in helping those people, by creating community. There's a lot about that movie, in that, by creating community. So that was his purpose in life now, to give community to these nomads. So I also think he's talking about that life, that purpose that he's now chosen, and how in this life, he has learned that it's never a goodbye, but it's a see you down the road, right? Literally the road where they're traveling. But to me, with the with the belief in reincarnation, with the belief that we are immortal beings, that this is not a one and done life, that we will see ourselves, and our families, and again down the road, whether it's down the road in the next reincarnation, and the many many reincarnations that we'll have. And when I saw that, like, again, we don't know that man's religion, his belief. I mean, he shared that belief, but I don't know if it's about reincarnation. But at the same time, I found myself, thinking like, and it's at moments like this when I want to shout to everybody that wants to listen, of how hopeful this gift of reincarnation is to all of us, because we know that he will see his son again. We know that they will get to work together again, and continue to love one another. And it's not the final. So in some ways, again, not knowing what his spiritual religious beliefs are, he knows deep inside that he will see him again. So good for him. But imagine so many people that don't have that faith, don't have that hope, that really think that this is it, right? My loved one passed away. My things that I had are no longer here, and I never get to see them again. I never get to experience these things again. And reincarnation really comes and breaks that belief, and gives us the hope, and gives us, the things to look forward to. So, yeah, I think it's such a moving part of the movie. And that's really what, I want, my final thought to be, because and even though those, reincarnation is that gift, and is, is the mechanism that gives us these second chances, and third chances, and 100 chances, it should not be taken for granted. Because again, there's a line out there, and there are beings that really want to be in our position, believe it or not, right? And I mean, it's even, I chuckle at that like, who wants to be in my position right now in this planet during a pandemic? But there is a line out the door of brothers and sisters that would give anything, everything, to be in our places. So let's use the most of this life. Let's use the most of this incarnation. So we have to reincarnate a little bit less, because it is great to come back, and it is great to have the second chances, but it's not our end goal. Our end goal is perfection, is that true happiness that we don't even know what that feels like. But it's also, being in harmony with the universe and with our father, and co-creating along, and that is kind of, it's so distant, but at the same time it's so close that we can almost, taste it. So let's not take for granted these incarnation, and take the steps that we need in our inner transformation, to do what's best for us, for our loved ones, and keep progressing through this life. So those are my thoughts, as scattered as they are, and as probably like all over the place. But thank you so much for listening. And yeah, so I would just like to leave. I think the biggest question, if you haven't figured out by now, is what are your thoughts on reincarnation, right? Like how have you made sense of reincarnation for your own self, for your lives, for how do you see it? So yes, thank you everybody for listening.
Thank you, Murillo. Thank you so much. Uh, we can start um, with our talk now, and we thank you everybody for watching until here. We're gonna stop the recording. But God bless you all. We hope that you have something figured out until now after this amazing speech from Rito. Thank you. Have a nice day. So